Millionaire bride was shunned for marrying a poor man. The village brought her flowers in shame. The white dress moved in the dry wind like a surrender flag nobody wanted to see. Annabel Rose Montgomery stood alone at the altar of Saddle Ridge's chapel, her hands trembling around a bouquet of wildflowers she'd picked herself that morning. No organ music, no whispers of admiration, no rustle of Sunday best fabrics. Just the hollow sound of wind through broken windows and the weight of 1,000 absent eyes. The pews stretched empty as graves. "You don't need to do this, Belle." Jesse McCall's voice came out rough, like words dragged over broken glass. He stood 3 feet away, close enough to touch, too far to save her from what she was choosing. His clothes told their own story, boots worn through at the heel, pants mended with different-colored thread, a shirt that had seen too many washings and not enough rest. But his eyes, grey as storm clouds, steady as bedrock, those belonged to a man who'd stopped apologizing for existing. "Already done, Jessie." She lifted her chin, the gesture pure Montgomery pride, even as tears tracked down her cheeks. "The question is whether you're staying or running. Never ran from anything in my life, except from me. 3 times. He flinched. Truth did that, cut cleaner than lies ever could. Outside, the town of Saddle Ridge went about its business with pointed normalcy. The general store stayed open. The saloon poured drinks. The bank counted money. Not one soul had come to see Colonel Montgomery's only daughter marry a man who owned nothing but the shirt on his back and a reputation darker than burnt coffee. The chapel door creaked. Both turned, hope flaring like a match in the dark. But it was just the wind, or maybe the weight of judgment pushing against old wood. "Where's the preacher?" Jessie asked, though they both knew the answer. "It seems Reverend Dalton had urgent business in the next county." Annabel's laugh was bitter as quinine. "Funny how urgent business strikes when Montgomery money stops flowing." Jessie's jaw tightened. "We don't need his blessing." "No, but we need someone to—" "I'll do it." The voice came from the shadows near the confessional. Old Pete, the town drunk, stumbled forward, except his eyes were clearer than anyone had seen them in years. "You?" Annabel couldn't hide her surprise. "Was a chaplain once. In the war before—" He gestured vaguely at himself, at what he'd become. "Still got the authority, if not the sobriety." Jessie stepped forward. "Pete, you don't have to—" "Boy saved my life 6 months back," Pete interrupted, looking at Annabel. "Pulled me out of a burning barn when everyone else was content to let me cook. Your man there got burns on his arms to prove it. So, yeah, I'll marry you. And to hell with what this town thinks." Annabel looked at Jessie's arms, seeing for the first time the shiny patches of scar tissue he'd kept hidden under long sleeves. Another secret, another sacrifice nobody knew about. "You never said," wasn't worth saying. But she saw the truth in his eyes. Everything Jesse McCall did was quiet, private, like he'd learned that making noise only brought pain. Pete cleared his throat. "Are we doing this or not? My liquid courage won't last forever." They stood before him, no music, no flowers except the ones in Annabel's death grip. The empty chapel felt like a tomb, but maybe that was fitting. Something was dying here. The question was whether something else would be born. "Annabel Rose Montgomery," Pete began, his voice finding rhythms probably learned decades ago. "Do you take this man?" "I do. I haven't asked the—" "I do to all of it. Whatever you're going to ask, I do." Pete blinked, then turned to Jesse. "And you, Jesse McCall, do you—" "Wait!" Jesse reached into his pocket, pulled out not a ring, but a leather cord worn soft with age. This was my mother's. She wore it every day of her life, said it reminded her that the strongest things aren't always the prettiest. He wrapped it around Annabel's wrist, 3 times, a trinity of loops. "I can't give you gold, Belle. Can't give you silver, but I can give you this something that lasted. Something that held tight through good times and bad. That's what I'm offering. Not riches, just holding tight." The chapel door burst open. Colonel Montgomery's foreman, Bull Harrison, filled the doorway like bad news coming to dinner. 2 ranch hands flanked him, hands resting on gun butts. "Miss Annabel, your father sent us to collect you." "My father's been dead 3 months, Bull." "I mean your uncle, Judge Montgomery. He's concerned about your choices." Jesse shifted, putting himself slightly between Annabel and the men. Not aggressive, just there, like a wall that chose where to stand. "The lady made her choice." Jesse said quietly. Bull's hand tightened on his pistol. Wasn't talking to you, Drifter. Not a drifter. Not anymore. No? What are you then? Her husband. Jesse's voice carried no challenge, just fact. Or about to be, if you'll step back and let Pete finish. The tension stretched taut as fence wire. Then Annabelle did something nobody expected. She laughed. Real laughter, not the bitter kind. Oh, Bull. Still trying to play the loyal dog? Tell me, did my uncle also mention he's been skimming from the ranch accounts for 2 years? Or that my father knew and was planning to call in the Rangers before he died? My Bull went as white as chapel walls. Yeah, Annabelle continued, steel in her voice now. I may have chosen love over money, but I didn't choose stupid. I've got letters. Enough to see you and my dear uncle sharing a cell in Huntsville. She stepped forward. So, you want to interrupt my wedding, or you want to walk away while you still can? The foreman looked at his men, calculated odds, then stepped back. This isn't over. No, Annabelle agreed, but it is for today. Close the door on your way out. They left, but their departure felt more like a threat than a retreat. Pete whistled low. Remind me never to play poker with you, miss. Finish the ceremony, Pete. He did, words tumbling faster now, racing against whatever storm was building outside. When he pronounced them married, Jesse kissed his bride with a tenderness that made even drunk Pete look away. What now? Jesse asked when they broke apart. Now we go home. Belle, I don't have the old McGowan place. I bought it last month, cash, in my name only. She smiled at his stunned expression. What? You think you're the only one who can keep secrets? They walked out of the chapel together, into a town that turned its back with choreographed precision. Curtains fell, doors closed. Even the dogs seemed to look away. But as they passed the schoolhouse, Annabelle saw something that made her stop. A face in the window. Little Mary Chen, the laundryman's daughter. The girl pressed her small hand against the glass. A greeting, a blessing, a tiny rebellion. Annabelle pressed her hand to her heart in response. One witness, at least. One soul who saw them choose each other over everything else. At the edge of town, Jesse suddenly stopped. Belle, there's something you need to know about about what they think I did. I know about the rustling accusation. You know what they said, not what happened. She studied his face. Then tell me. Not here, not where they can see. He looked back at the town that had rejected them. Some stories need telling in private, where the walls don't have ears and the wind doesn't carry tales. They continued to the McGowan place, their place now. It sat 2 miles outside town, a small ranch that had failed like so many others. But the house was solid, the well was deep, and the land had good bones. It's not much, Annabelle said as they stood before it. It's more than I ever dreamed of having. Jesse, she touched his scarred arms. What else haven't you told me? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, your father didn't die of a heart attack, Belle. He was poisoned, slow-acting, made to look natural. The world tilted. What? I was there, working late in the stables. I saw your uncle leave your father's study that night, saw him burn papers in the forge. Didn't think anything of it until your father took sick the next day. And you never... Who'd believe me? The drifter with a rustling charge hanging over his head. Jesse's laugh was hollow. Besides, I had no proof. Just what I saw. What I knew. The rustling charge. Was that... Your uncle's doing it. Made sure I'd never be credible if I ever tried to speak up. He met her eyes. I stayed anyway. Couldn't leave knowing he was circling you like a buzzard. Couldn't protect you as more than hired help, but couldn't abandon you either. Annabelle sank onto the porch steps. The weight of truth was heavier than any wedding dress. So you let the whole town think you were a thief, let them spit at you, call you names, all to stay close enough to protect me from a man I called family. It wasn't your fault what he was. No, but it's my fault I didn't see it. Didn't question why Uncle Theodore was so eager to control the ranch after Father died. Didn't wonder why he pushed so hard against any suitor who couldn't be bought or controlled. She looked up at Jesse. He'll come for us. I know. He'll try to destroy you, really destroy you this time. I know that too. Then why? Why stay? Why marry me knowing what it'll cost? Jesse knelt before her, taking her hands in his work-rough ones. "Because some things are worth more than safety, Belle. Worth more than reputation or comfort or even life." He pressed her hands to his chest. "You think you chose down when you picked me, but from where I'm standing, I'm the one who married up." "Way up!" To a woman brave enough to see past what everyone said to what actually was. Tears came then, not the pretty kind from romance novels, but the ugly kind that carried years of loneliness and fear and desperate hope. Jesse held her while she cried, didn't try to fix it, just hold on. Like that leather cord around her wrist, not pretty, but lasting. When the tears finally stopped, the sun was setting. Their first sunset as husband and wife, watched from the porch of a failing ranch with a killer possibly planning their deaths. "No regrets?" Jesse asked. "None. You?" "Just one." Her heart stuttered. "What?" "Wish I'd been brave enough to tell you the truth sooner. Might have saved us both some pain, or might have gotten you killed." She stood, pulling him up with her. "Come on, husband. Let's go see what kind of home we've made." The house was dusty but clean. Someone had been here recently, she realized. The floors were swept, the windows were washed, fresh water in the pitcher. "Did you?" Jesse shook his head. "Wasn't me." They found the answer in the kitchen, a loaf of bread on the table, still warm, a pot of stew on the stove, and a note in careful script. "A wedding needs a wedding feast, even if the town's too blind to provide it." A friend. No signature. But Annabelle recognized the handwriting. Mrs. Chen, the laundryman's wife. Another quiet rebellion. They ate in silence, the weight of the day settling around them like dust. Outside, night crept across the land, bringing with it all the uncertainties tomorrow would hold. "Belle," Jesse said suddenly, "that leverage you mentioned. The ledgers. You really have them?" She smiled. "In the bank in Austin. Safe deposit box in my maiden name. Uncle Theodore might be a snake, but I learned from watching him. Always have insurance." "Smart. Not smart enough to see through him earlier?" "You saw through him when it mattered. That's what counts." A knock at the door stopped her reply. They both tensed. Jesse reached for the rifle above the mantel, an old habit from a man who'd lived too long as prey. "Who's there?" No answer. Just another knock. Softer this time. Jesse opened the door carefully, rifle ready. Nobody there, but on the step sat a single flower. A desert rose, hardy and beautiful, wrapped in brown paper. Annabelle picked it up. No note. No sign of who'd left it. "Secret admirer," Jesse tried to joke, but his eyes were scanning the darkness. Maybe, or maybe, she didn't finish. Couldn't put into words the hope that someone, anyone, might be having second thoughts about the day's cruelty. They went to bed in a house that wasn't quite home yet, in a marriage hours old, with death threats hanging over them like storm clouds. But they went to bed together, and in a world trying to tear them apart, that felt like victory. The language of flowers. 3 days passed in strange quiet. No riders from town, no threatening visits. Just the work of making a dead ranch breathe again. Jesse fixed fences with an intensity that spoke of a man who'd never had anything worth protecting before. Annabelle attacked the ledgers, trying to make numbers dance into profit where only loss had lived. They worked separately, but within sight of each other, like they were afraid to test if their marriage could survive normalcy after being born in crisis. On the 4th morning, Annabelle opened the door to find another flower. This time, a handful of Mexican primroses, their pink petals already wilting in the heat. Still no note, still no sign of the giver. "That's 3 now," Jesse said from behind her. He'd been up before dawn, the way of men who'd learned that safety came with vigilance. 4, she corrected, pointing to the windowsill where she'd placed the others. Desert rose, Indian paintbrush, evening primrose, and now these. Someone's trying to say something, or someone's trying to make us lower our guard, but even he didn't sound convinced. There was something, too, humble about the offerings. These weren't hothouse flowers or expensive arrangements. They were wild flowers, the kind that grew in ditches and forgotten corners. The kind poor folks picked because they couldn't afford better. That afternoon the quiet shattered. Hoofbeats approached fast. Jesse grabbed the rifle, pushed Annabelle behind him. But it wasn't Bull Harrison's or Judge Montgomery's men. It was Sheriff Watson alone, looking like he'd aged 5 years in 4 days. "Jesse, Mrs. McCall." He tipped his hat to Annabel, and she realized it was the first time anyone had used her married name. "Mind if I water my horse? Help yourself, Sheriff." Watson dismounted slowly, like everything hurt. While his horse drank, he seemed to wrestle with words. "Finally, your uncle's filed papers, claiming Jesse kidnapped you, forced you into marriage, says you're not in your right mind, grieving your father and all." "That's ridiculous," Annabel started, but Watson held up a hand. "I know it is. Everyone with eyes knows it is. But Judge Montgomery's got friends in high places. Rangers are coming, week, maybe 2. He looked at Jesse. "They'll arrest you, take you to Austin for trial, and we both know how that'll go." "Why warn us?" Jesse asked. Watson spat tobacco juice. "Because I've been sheriff here 15 years, seen a lot of bad men. You aren't one of them, Jesse. That rustling charge never sat right with me. And now—" He gestured helplessly. "Town's gone crazy. Half of them know this is wrong but are too scared to say. The other half are too deep in Montgomery's pockets to care." "Which half are you?" Annabel asked. "The tired half, ma'am. The half that's thinking maybe it's time to find a new town," he remounted. "You didn't hear this from me, but if I were you, I'd be gone before those Rangers arrive. Mexico's not far. Start fresh where the Montgomery name don't reach." After he left, Jesse and Annabel stood in silence, watching dust settle where Watson had ridden away. "We could run," Jesse said finally. "No. Belle, no." Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. "I've got the evidence to bury my uncle. We run now. He wins. My father's murder goes unpunished. The ranch gets carved up by vultures, and we spend our lives looking over our shoulders. I'd rather look over my shoulder than see you visiting me in prison. Or at my grave." She turned to him, fire in her eyes. "Jesse McCall, I did not scandalize an entire town and give up my inheritance to marry a man who runs. We fight smart, but we fight." That evening, as they planned their next move, a knock came at the door, different from the flower giver's soft taps. This was firm, purposeful. Jesse opened it to find Tom Brennan, owner of the general store. The man shifted nervously, hat in hand. "Jesse, Mrs. McCall, another person using her married name. Small rebellion. I came to apologize." "For what specifically?" Annabel's voice could have frozen hell. "For not coming to your wedding, for letting fear make a coward of me, for—" He pulled something from his pocket. "A small leather pouch. For not giving this to you then. It was my mother's wedding gift for every bride in Saddle Ridge for 40 years. Until I let Montgomery's money matter more than Montgomery's character." He set the pouch on the porch rail and fled before they could respond. Inside was a cameo brooch, delicate and old and beautiful. "2 rebels in one day," Jesse murmured. "3 if you count the flowers." "4," Annabel said, pointing. Another rider approached. This time it was Dr. Holcomb, medical bag in hand. "Heard there might be trouble coming," he said without preamble. "Figured you should have these." He handed Jesse a bottle of laudanum and a field surgery kit. "Man should be able to tend his own wounds if needed. Also—" He looked uncomfortable. "I was the one who signed your father's death certificate, Mrs. McCall. Natural causes, I wrote, but I've been thinking. Some of those symptoms, they match things I've seen before. In the war, when men wanted other men dead, quiet-like." "You'd testify to that?" "In Austin? With a real judge?" "Yes, ma'am, I would." He climbed back on his horse. "You folks take care. Storm's coming, but maybe it'll wash some of this town's dirt away when it does." After he left, Jesse and Annabel sat on the porch, watching stars emerge. "Something's changing," she said. "Yeah, the question is whether it's changing fast enough." The next morning brought 2 flowers. Not wildflowers this time, but cultivated roses. The kind that took work to grow in desert soil. The kind that said someone had sacrificed from their own garden. With them came a note, barely legible. "My husband was like yours once, accused, shunned, hung. I stayed quiet then. Can't stay quiet now. E.P." Annabel read it 3 times. E.P. Emma Patterson, the minister's wife. Widow. Reverend Patterson died 10 years ago, but before that— Annabel's eyes widened. "Oh my God, I remember now. There was a scandal. Her first husband was Mexican, accused of stealing cattle. They hung him, and she married the minister 6 months later. Everyone said it was for protection. And she's been living with that guilt ever since. They were still absorbing this when more hoofbeats sounded, but this time it wasn't a single rider. Bull Harrison led 6 men up to their gate. His arm was in a sling. Apparently he tried to draw on someone faster recently. "McCall, you and your woman come out. Judge wants to see you both." "Judge can come here if he wants to talk," Jesse called back. "Don't think you understand. This isn't a request." "Don't think you understand either, Bull." Annabelle stepped onto the porch, her father's Colt visible on her hip. "You're on my land, posted land. I see 7 trespassers who haven't been invited. Your land. Little girl, you don't own anything. The judge had you declared incompetent this morning. All Montgomery holdings revert to him as next of kin." "Interesting," Annabelle smiled. It was not a nice smile. "Tell me, did the judge happen to mention the federal marshals who'll be here tomorrow? The ones I telegraphed from Austin before my wedding. The ones very interested in certain financial irregularities." Bull's confidence wavered. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" "Tell you what, Bull. You ride back to town. Tell my uncle that if he wants to talk, he can come here, alone, unarmed, like family should." Her smile sharpened. "Unless he's afraid of his niece and her husband." But the men muttered among themselves. Calling the judge a coward, even by implication, was dangerous, but so was being wrong about federal marshals. "You got one day," Bull finally said. "Judge comes tomorrow. You better be ready to listen." They rode off, dust and threats in their wake. "Federal marshals?" Jesse asked when they were gone. "Complete lie, but it'll buy us time. Uncle Theodore's paranoid enough to check, and checking takes time. Time for what? For the town to decide what it wants to be." That afternoon, the flowers came not as single offerings, but as a procession. First, the Chen family walked the 2 miles from town. Mr. Chen carried a potted jasmine, his wife held chrysanthemums, and little Mary clutched daisies. "For a new beginning," Mr. Chen said simply, setting the plants on the porch. "In my country, we say the perfume of flowers stays in the hand that gives them. This town's hands have been empty too long." They left quickly, but others followed. The widow Martinez with her 3 daughters bringing marigolds. "For the spirits to find you," she whispered. Old Sam, the former slave who worked the livery, with sunflowers that towered over his bent frame. "These face the light," he said. "Figured you might need reminding which way that is." By evening, the porch was transformed. What had started as single secret offerings had become a public declaration. Not everyone in town, not even most, but enough. Enough to show that silence wasn't the same as agreement. Judge Theodore Montgomery arrived at sunset. Alone, as demanded, but Annabelle could see riders holding back at the property line. He sat his horse like a king surveying rebellious subjects. "Annabelle, you've had your fun. Time to come home." "I am home, Uncle." "This?" He gestured dismissively at the house, the flowers, Jesse standing quiet but ready. "This is a child's tantrum. Your father would be ashamed. My father would be alive, if not for you." The judge went very still. "Careful, niece. Grief makes people say crazy things. Judges tend to lock up crazy people, for their own good." "And murderers? What do judges do with them?" "I don't know what Jesse's been filling your head with." "Jesse didn't tell me anything I couldn't figure out myself. The amended will, the sudden illness, the way you were so ready to take control." Annabelle stepped forward. "I have the original will, Uncle. The one leaving the ranch to me, not to you as guardian, the one you thought you burned." Theodore's mask finally cracked. "You little—" "I also have letters. Your correspondence with Bull about skimming profits. Your deals with rustlers to hit neighboring ranches, drive down prices so you could buy cheap." She smiled coldly. "Father taught me well. Always have insurance," he used to say. "Guess I learned from both Montgomery men." "Even if that were true, who'd believe you? A girl who threw away everything for a drifter." "The governor might, especially when he learns his own cattle have been going missing, trails leading back to your associates." Theodore's hand twitched toward his gun. Jesse shifted slightly and the judge froze. "You won't shoot me, Uncle!" Too many witnesses saw you ride up alone. Too many questions if I turn up dead. Annabelle's voice was steady as stone. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave. Tonight. Take whatever you've stolen and run. Maybe Mexico. Maybe California. I don't care. But you'll be gone by dawn, or those letters go to Austin. You'd let your father's killer walk free? I'm letting a pathetic old man choose exile over exposure. Because despite everything, you're still blood. And because, she looked at the flowers covering her porch, because this town's had enough poison. Time to try a different cure. Theodore stared at her for a long moment, then at Jessie, then at the small crowd that had gathered at the property line, townspeople who'd followed to see how this would end. This isn't over, he said finally. Yes, it is. Annabelle's voice carried across the distance. It ended the moment I chose love over fear. You just didn't know it yet. The judge wheeled his horse and rode away. The watching crowd parted for him, then closed again, facing the house, waiting. Jessie took Annabelle's hand. Think he'll run? He'll run. He's a coward at heart, always was. And them. He nodded at the townspeople. Annabelle raised her voice. Anyone who wants to stay for supper is welcome. We don't have much, but what we have we'll share. For a moment nobody moved. Then Emma Patterson stepped forward, a covered dish in her hands. I brought stew. Figured you might need it. Others followed. Food appeared from wagons, blankets spread on the ground. What had started as shame offerings of flowers became something else. Not quite a celebration, more like a reckoning. A town looking at itself and not liking what it saw. As people ate and talked quietly, Sheriff Watson arrived. He looked around at the impromptu gathering, then dismounted. Judge Montgomery lit out an hour ago. Took what he could carry, left what he couldn't. He paused. Also left this. He handed Annabelle a deed, the ranch. Signed back over to her, along with a note. You win, for now. Forever, she said softly. The sheriff nodded. Talk to the mayor, town council. We're thinking maybe it's time for some changes. Start with calling off those rangers. Seems the complaint got lost somehow. Imagine that. Also thinking maybe Jessie might consider a deputy badge. Town could use men who do what's right, not what's profitable. Jessie looked stunned. Sheriff, don't answer now. Think on it. The town's got some healing to do. Might be good to have folks who understand wearing the badge. As the evening wore on, stories emerged. Quiet rebellions. Secret kindnesses. The Mexican families Jessie had warned about raids. The Chinese workers he'd taught to read. The widow he'd repaired fences for, asking nothing in return. Small acts that had added up to a reputation built on deeds, not words. You knew, Annabelle said to him later, as they sat surrounded by neighbors becoming friends. You knew some of them would come around. Hoped. Hope's different from knowing. Why didn't you tell me? Jessie was quiet, watching little Mary Chen teach other children a clapping game. Because hope shared too early becomes expectation. Expectation disappointed becomes bitterness. Figured it was better to let hope grow wild, see what bloomed. And if nothing had, then we'd have had each other, and that would have been enough. Emma Patterson approached them as the gathering wound down. In her hands was a Bible, worn and marked. This was my first husband's, she said. He couldn't read, but he'd have me read to him every night. His favorite was Ruth. Where you go, I will go. He said those words were for more than just marriage. They were for any love strong enough to cross borders. She pressed the Bible into Annabelle's hands. Maybe it's time they were spoken again, over something other than a grave. As the last wagons rolled away, Annabelle and Jessie stood among the flowers that had transformed their porch into a garden. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The ranch still struggled. The town still harbored those who'd chosen hate over hope. The world beyond Saddle Ridge hadn't changed just because one small place had found a moment of grace. But tonight they were home. They were together, and they were not alone. No regrets? Jessie asked, their question becoming tradition. One, Annabelle admitted. His face fell. What? I wish I'd been brave enough to choose you sooner, before it cost so much pain. Pain's just the price of growth, Belle. Every flower on this porch pushed through dirt to bloom. She leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of a man who'd waited through accusation and isolation for a love he'd never thought he deserved. "Then let's grow something beautiful, Jesse McCall. Something that'll outlast both Montgomery money and Montgomery pride." "Already started," he said, gesturing at the transformed porch, the reconciling town, the future spreading before them like sunrise. "Already started. What grows from ashes?" 6 months later, the saddle ridge that had turned its back on a wedding now prepared for a different kind of gathering. The old McGowan place, now the McCall Ranch, had transformed. Where desert had ruled, gardens grew. Where fences had failed, new ones stood strong. The house bore fresh paint and curtains made by many hands. It had become what its owners had become, a bridge between worlds. Jesse wore the deputy's badge now, partnered with Sheriff Watson in keeping a peace that felt more real than the fearful quiet of Montgomery rule. Annabelle had turned her father's ranch profitable again, but more than that, she'd turned it into something new. A place where Mexican vaqueros earned the same as white cowboys, where Chinese workers could bring their families, where the color of your skin mattered less than the strength of your back and the truth of your word. Not everyone approved, but approval and acceptance were different things, and the town was learning the distinction. "Are you ready for this?" Jesse asked, finding his wife in their bedroom, staring at herself in the mirror. Annabelle's hand rested on her stomach, still flat, but carrying promise. "Ready as anyone can be to tell a town that barely accepted our marriage that now there'll be a child." "Our child," Jesse corrected, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "And this town's learned a lot in 6 months. Some of it, Bill Morrison still spits when you walk by. Bill Morrison's running out of people who'll listen to him spit." A knock at the door interrupted them. Not the soft tap of flower givers. Those had evolved into open visits, but urgent, demanding. Jesse opened the door to find a well-dressed stranger standing outside. Well-dressed, city clothes, face like he'd been carved from righteous anger. "I'm looking for Mrs. Jessie McCall, formerly Montgomery." "Who's asking?" "Elijah Trent, attorney-at-law, Austin." He produced a card. "I represent the estate of Theodore Montgomery." Annabelle appeared beside Jesse. "My uncle's dead? 3 months now, killed in a dispute in El Paso. Apparently he tried his games with the wrong people." Trent's expression suggested he wasn't mourning. "I'm here because of his will. It seems he had an attack of conscience before he died, or maybe spite. Hard to tell with men like that." He handed over a document. Annabelle read, her face cycling through emotions. "He left everything to you," Trent continued. "Every penny he'd hidden, every deed he'd hoarded, along with this." Another envelope. His confession, names, dates, crimes, everyone he corrupted, everyone who helped him, signed and witnessed. "Why?" Jesse asked what Annabelle couldn't. His letter explains. "May I?" At Annabelle's nod, Trent read, "To my niece, who showed more courage in choosing love over money than I showed in a lifetime of choosing money over everything. I die as I lived alone, but perhaps my death can water seeds better than my life ever did. Use what I leave to build what I tried to destroy. And know that in the end, you were right. Love outlasts both Montgomery money and Montgomery pride." Annabelle sank into a chair. Jesse knelt beside her. "It's a trap," he said. "Has to be." "No trap," Trent assured. "I verified everything. The money's real. The confessions are legitimate. Several arrests have already been made based on the information." He paused. "Your uncle was many things, Mrs. McCall, but stupid wasn't one of them. He knew his sins. In the end, he chose to face them. Or choose to have the last word," Annabelle said quietly. "Even in death, making it about him." Perhaps. But does the motive matter if the result serves justice? After Trent left, promising to handle all legal matters, Annabelle and Jesse sat in silence. "What do we do with it?" Jesse finally asked. "The money, the land, all of it. What we've been doing. Build bridges. Just bigger ones now." That evening they called a town meeting. Not in the saloon or the church, but in the open air, under stars that didn't care about skin color or bank accounts. Annabelle stood before her neighbors, a word that meant something different now than it had 6 months ago. "You all know my story. Our story." She gestured to Jesse. "How this town taught me that choosing love means choosing sides. Well, I'm done with sides, done with the lines that divide us. She explained about the inheritance, the opportunity it represented, not just money, but a chance to remake Saddle Ridge into something unprecedented. A school, she said, where all children learn together. A medical clinic that doesn't check your birthplace before checking your fever. Fair wages for fair work. Loans for families wanting to start businesses, regardless of what those families look like. That's a pretty dream, Bill Morrison called out, predictable as sunrise. But dreams don't change reality. No, Emma Patterson stood up, but courage does. And I've seen more courage in this woman than in all the men who used to run this town. She looked around. We have a choice. Same one we had 6 months ago. Choose fear or choose hope. I know which one I'm picking. Others stood. The Chen family, the Mexican vaqueros, former slaves who'd made Saddle Ridge home, but also others, white families, who'd benefited from the old ways, but were tired of the cost. I was wrong, Tom Brennan said simply. Wrong to stay quiet, wrong to value comfort over conscience. But if the McCalls are willing to forgive that wrong, I'm willing to work for something right. That's when the riders came. A dozen men, torches blazing, hoods covering faces. The nightmares of the South come to West Texas. Heard there was talk of mixing races, the lead rider called. Heard there was forgetting of natural order. We're here to remind you. Jesse stepped forward, hand on his gun. Watson flanked him, but before violence could erupt, something unexpected happened. Annabelle laughed. Not nervous laughter, not fear, real, deep, belly-shaking laughter that echoed across the square. Natural order? She stepped past Jesse, past the sheriff, walking straight toward the hooded men. Let me tell you about natural order. My uncle, pillar of society, defender of natural order, poisoned my father, stole from his neighbors, destroyed lives for profit. She kept walking. The riders' horses shifted nervously. You know what's natural? Flowers growing through rock, rivers cutting through mountains. Love surviving hate. She stopped just out of reach. So which are you? The rock that gets broken, the mountain that gets carved, or the hate that dies when love refuses to? Stay back, woman, or what? She pulled Theodore's confession from her pocket. You'll kill me, like these men killed others? She read names. Dates, crimes. With each word, riders flinched. Oh yes, Uncle Theodore was thorough. Names, faces, even under hoods, he knew you all. One rider turned his horse. Then another. Running won't help, Annabelle called after them. This goes to the governor tomorrow, unless... The lead rider's hand tightened on his torch. Unless what? Unless you ride away. Tonight. Don't come back. Don't threaten these people again. Disappear, and these pages disappear too. You'd let murderers go free? I'd let poison drain from a wound rather than spread it. She looked at each hooded figure. Your choice. Keep riding the past into graves, or ride away toward whatever future you can salvage. For a moment, violence trembled in the air. Then the leader wheeled his horse. This ain't over. Yes, Annabelle said firmly. It is. You just don't know it yet. They rode away, taking their torches and leaving something better, space for the town to breathe. That was foolish, Jesse said when she returned to his side. That was necessary, she addressed the crowd. They'll be back. Maybe not those men, but others like them. The question is, will we be ready? Will we stand together or let fear divide us again? The vote was unanimous. Not for some utopia, they were too practical for that, but for trying, for building something better on the ashes of something worse. 3 months later, Annabelle stood in the new schoolhouse, watching children of all colors learn letters together. Her hand rested on her swollen belly, feeling life kick against her palm. Regrets? Jesse asked, joining her. None. You? Just wondering what kind of world we're bringing this child into. A better one than we were born into. Not perfect, but better. Emma Patterson approached, now the school's first teacher. Mrs. McCall, there's someone here to see you. A young woman waited outside, Mexican, pretty despite the dust of hard travel, a baby in her arms. Senora McCall, I'm Rosa Morales. This is my daughter, Esperanza. I have come. I have heard. She struggled with English and started again in Spanish. Annabelle's Spanish was improving but still rough. She caught the words journey, hope, and new beginning. She says she's fled a bad situation, Emma translated. Heard about Saddle Ridge, about chances for women alone. Wants to work, raise her daughter somewhere safe. Annabelle studied the woman, saw her own desperation reflected, her own choice to risk everything for love. Welcome to Saddle Ridge, she said in careful Spanish. We have work, we have hope, we have room for those willing to build. Rosa burst into tears, grateful, exhausted tears that needed no translation. That evening, as they prepared another room in their ever-expanding house, Jessie asked, "How many more?" "As many as come," Annabelle replied. "As many as need what we needed, a place where love matters more than law." "The money won't last forever, Belle." "No. But the idea will. Look at Tom Brennan, he's hiring Chinese workers now. The Martinezes are teaching white kids Spanish. Sheriff Watson's training a Mexican deputy." She smiled. "We planted seeds, Jessie. Now we're just tending the garden." That night, the first snow of winter fell on Saddle Ridge. It covered the old divisions, made everything equally white and new. Temporary, of course. Snow melts, but while it lasted, the town looked like what it was, becoming a place where the past was being buried under the promise of tomorrow. In the McCall house, Rosa sang her daughter to sleep with Mexican lullabies. In the main bedroom, Annabelle and Jessie felt their own child move between them. And on the porch, the pot of jasmine the Chens had given them bloomed despite the cold, proving that some things flower in defiance of what should be possible. "No regrets?" Their nightly question. "None," they said together, and meant it. The harvest of truth, 5 years after the wedding that had scandalized Saddle Ridge. The town was unrecognizable. Where dust had ruled, trees now lined streets. Where division had festered, children played together in the square. The schoolhouse had expanded twice. The medical clinic served 3 counties. And at the heart of it all, the McCall Ranch stood as proof that love could build as surely as hate could destroy. Annabelle watched her daughter, Sarah Rose McCall, play with the other children, 4 years old, with Jessie's steady grey eyes and her mother's determined chin. She spoke 3 languages, English from her parents, Spanish from Rosa, who'd become family, and Mandarin from the Chen children, who were her constant companions. "She's going to change the world," Jessie said, joining his wife on the porch. "She already has, just by existing." The miracle of Sarah Rose wasn't just her mixed heritage in a world that preferred pure bloodlines. It was that she didn't know she was a miracle. To her, playing with children of all colors was as natural as breathing. The walls others had built didn't exist in her world because her parents had refused to acknowledge them. That's when they saw the carriage. Expensive. Austin plates. The kind of vehicle that brought either very good or very bad news. A woman stepped out, elderly but elegant, wearing widow's black despite the heat. "Mrs. McCall," her voice carried Eastern education and old money. "I'm Catherine Montgomery, Theodore's sister, your father's sister, your aunt." Annabelle's hand found Jessie's. "I didn't know father had a sister." "He wouldn't have spoken of me. I married a Negro doctor. The family disowned me 40 years ago." Catherine's smile was bittersweet. "But I've followed your story, what you've built here, and I've come to ask a favor." They invited her in, served tea in china cups that had once graced Montgomery tables and now served whoever needed comfort. "I'm dying," Catherine said simply. "Cancer, months, maybe weeks. But before I go, I wanted to see the woman who did what I couldn't." "What do you mean?" "I chose love too, my dear. But I chose it by running, hiding. My husband and I fled north, denied our families, and lived as strangers to our past." She touched Annabelle's hand. "You chose love by standing, fighting, building. You didn't just marry the man you loved, you changed the world that said you couldn't." "We had help," Annabelle said. The town followed your lead. Don't minimize that." Catherine reached into her bag. "Oh, which brings me to my favor. My husband passed away 5 years ago. We had no children, the price of our choices. But we had wealth. His medical practice, my inheritance from sources Theodore never knew about. I want to leave it to you." "Aunt Catherine, we don't need..." Not for you, for this. She gestured out the window at the integrated school, the children playing. I've done my research. What you've built here is spreading. Other towns asking how. Other couples refuse to accept natural order. But ideas need funding to become movements. She produced documents. The Montgomery Foundation, already established, already funded, dedicated to supporting integrated communities across Texas, across the South, wherever people are brave enough to say that love matters more than blood. Jesse spoke for the first time. Why us? Why not run it yourself? Because I'm dying, Mr. McCall, and because... Catherine watched Sarah Rose run past, hand in hand with a Mexican boy and a Chinese girl. Because you've already proved you know how to plant seeds that outlast the sower. They talked through the afternoon. Catherine shared stories of the brother Annabelle's father had been before pride calcified his heart, of the family that might have been if fear hadn't divided them, of the choices that led to exile and the choices that led to transformation. I have one more gift, Catherine said as shadows lengthened. She pulled out a daguerreotype. Your grandparents, before the war, before the hate. The image showed a young couple smiling. The woman's hand rested on a Bible. The man held a flower, a rose. He gave her roses every anniversary, Catherine said. Said love should be renewed daily, like morning dew. Theodore forgot that. Your father forgot that, but you... She smiled at the flowers still adorning the porch. 5 years of offerings turned tradition. You remembered. That evening the town gathered for its weekly market. What had started as desperate cooperation had become joyful routine. Goods and stories were exchanged. Music from 3 cultures blending into something new. Children everywhere, the true harvest of changed hearts. Mama, why does that lady look sad? Sarah Rose asked, pointing at Catherine, who stood apart, watching. Because she's saying goodbye, sweetheart. To us? To everything. Sarah Rose considered this with 4-year-old seriousness. Then she picked a flower from the nearest garden, a pink evening primrose, and marched over to Catherine. For you, she announced. Mama says flowers make sad people remember happy things. Catherine knelt, accepting the gift with tears. Thank you, child. What's your name? Sarah Rose McCall. What's yours? Catherine Montgomery. That's Mama's old name. Are you family? Yes, Catherine said softly. Family that took too long to come home. That night, as Catherine rested in their guest room, Annabelle found a letter in the documents. From her father, written days before his death. Mr. Catherine, I know Theodore watches me. I know my time is short. If something happens, look after Annabelle. She has your spirit, the one that chooses love over convention. I was too weak to support your choice. Too proud to admit error. But if my daughter shows your courage, support her. Help her succeed where we failed. Your brother, who loves you still, James. He knew, Annabelle whispered to Jesse. Father knew about Theodore. Tried to protect me even then. Family's complicated, Jesse said. But love is simple. Your father loved you. Catherine loves you. That love just took different paths to arrive. The next morning, Catherine was gone. A note explained she'd returned to Austin to finalize the foundation papers. She died 2 weeks later, peacefully, having seen what she needed to see. The Montgomery Foundation's first act was to purchase the old chapel where Annabelle and Jesse had married. They restored it, but differently. The doors that had closed to them now stood always open. The pews that had sat empty now held whoever needed shelter. The altar where they'd stood alone now witnessed marriages of all kinds. Full circle, Jesse said, standing with Annabelle where it all began. No, she corrected. Spiral. We're higher now than where we started. 10 years after the rope fell in the mud, Saddle Ridge had become famous. Newspaper writers called it the town that love built. Scholars came to study its integrated schools. Politicians came to promise support or threaten withdrawal. But mostly people just came, drawn by the hope that somewhere, somehow, different was possible. Jesse wore the sheriff's badge now. Watson had retired, saying the town needed law enforcement that looked like its future, not its past. Annabelle ran the foundation, funding schools and clinics and dreams across Texas. Sarah Rose, now 9, stood before the town council. They'd lowered the podium so she could see over it. "We need a library," she announced with her mother's determination. "Books in all languages, stories from all peoples. Because how can we be neighbors if we don't know each other's dreams?" "Little girl," Councilman Morrison, Bill's son, slightly softer but still struggling, "libraries cost money." "So did hate," Sarah Rose shot back. "My mama says this town spent generations paying for division. Maybe it's time to invest in connection." The library was approved unanimously. That evening, as their daughter planned where every book would go, Annabelle and Jessie walked through town, past the Chen's expanded store, past the Mexican bakery, past the integrated cemetery where Theodore Montgomery lay beside the Mexican workers he'd once exploited, death-making equals of them all. "Any regrets?" Jessie asked their old question. "None. You? Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we'd met differently. If there hadn't been so much pain, then we wouldn't be us," Annabelle said, "and this wouldn't be here. Pain was the price of the lesson." They stopped at the spot where Jessie had dug his circle that day and planted seeds in dead ground. Now it was a park. Children played where mockery had fallen. Lovers met where loneliness had ended. "Belle, that day in the chapel, when you chose me, did you know what it would cost?" "Ah, I knew it would cost everything I had." She took his hand. "I didn't know it would give me everything I needed." As they headed home, Sarah Rose ran ahead, already planning tomorrow's adventures. Behind them, Saddle Ridge settled into evening. The saloon served all colors. The church welcomed all faiths. The school taught all children. Not perfect. Perfection was for fairy tales, but real, grounded, growing. 25 years after the rope fell in the mud, Sarah Rose McCall stood in the Austin courthouse, newly sworn in as Texas's first female judge of mixed heritage. In the crowd, her parents sat with her siblings, biological and chosen blood and water, the family that love had built. "Judge McCall," a reporter asked, "what qualified you for this position?" "I was raised in a town that chose courage over comfort," she answered. "By parents who proved that love could transform law. I don't judge books. I judge from the truth that every person deserves the chance to choose better." "And the criticism that you're too young? Too idealistic?" Sarah Rose smiled her mother's smile. "My mama was 19 when she scandalized a town for love. My papa was nobody until he became everybody's hope. Young and idealistic, they built Saddle Ridge. Maybe it can build a better Texas, too." That night, back in Saddle Ridge for the celebration, 3 generations gathered in the chapel. The building had seen dozens of integrated marriages now, had sheltered fugitives and dreamers, had proved that sacred spaces were made by who was included, not who was excluded. "No regrets?" Sarah Rose asked her parents, continuing the tradition. "None," they said together. "Good, because I'm naming my first son after you both, Jesse James McCall." "You're pregnant?" Annabelle gasped. "Married last month quietly to David Chen Martinez." Sarah Rose grinned. "Figured I'd continue the family tradition of scandalizing with love." Jessie laughed, deep and true. "Your children will be everything," Sarah Rose finished. "They'll be everything America claims to be but fears to become." Outside, Saddle Ridge slept peacefully. The flowers on the McCall porch, renewed by neighbors' hands for decades, perfumed the air. In the cemetery, old divisions lay buried under shared earth. In the school, tomorrow's lessons waited to bridge yesterday's gaps. And in the chapel where a rope had fallen in mud, where mockery had turned to marriage, where shame had become celebration, a new generation prepared to push the spiral higher. Love had built a town. Now that town would build a nation. One marriage, one child, one choice at a time. "The woman he saved," Sarah Rose said, her hand on her belly carrying the future, "ended up saving not just him, but all of us. Because she taught us that when love kneels in the mud, flowers grow. And flowers given time crack every stone wall ever built." The candles flickered. The family prayed each in their own language, to their own understanding. And somewhere in the Texas night, another young woman in another small town made a choice that would scandalize, transform, and ultimately transcend. The spiral continued. The harvest was eternal. In Saddle Ridge, the flowers continued to bloom.